Welcome to Relatively Weird, the podcast where a couple of cousins get together and talk about everything weird. I'm Kim.
And I'm Jilli.
Let's get into it.
All right, so this is my story. Jilli's story. Actually, it's not mine.
Yours.
It is not mine, but I did research it.
Thank God.
Because you are known to not very much like the body horror genre.
No, I don't like medical stuff.
Which is like... Okay, this is very medical.
Ugh.
And it is also... You know, what is body horror? Body horror is like Saw. Like the Saw movies. Like gory, kind of... So if you do not appreciate that genre, maybe skip this one and go on to the next.
Alright, I'm out. I'll see you in a bit.
No, you have to stay. Alright. This is the story of a Japanese man named Hisashi Ochi. We begin in 1999 in Japan.
Oh, okay. It's not that long ago.
At a company called Japanese Fuel Conversion Company, or JCO for short. This company makes materials for nuclear power plants.
Oh no.
Yes.
Oh no.
So they particularly make like fuel rods for power plants.
Okay.
And this is, I'm going to be a little bit scientific. I hope I pronounce everything correctly. I am not a scientist.
No.
But hopefully this will go well.
Okay.
So their main job was to convert uranium hexafluoride into uranium dioxide.
Yes, as one does.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The government-approved way, which not probably just Japan's government, but everybody who deals with nuclear power.
Okay.
They would use a centrifuge. So the uranium hexafluoride powder would be poured into a dissolution tank. So it would, with uranium nitrate. So it would be mixed up. So the powder would dissolve.
Powder.
The powder would dissolve. And the mixture would be pumped into a tall cylindrical tank called a buffer tank.
Okay. Got it.
The shape of this tank is important because it prevents uranium particles from bumping into one another. If that happens enough, the situation will become critical and they might have a nuclear reaction.
Okay.
I know I can feel you know.
I'm nervous about this.
I think you should be.
Okay.
So this shape prevents it just from basically becoming unstable.
Okay.
It is then filtered through a precipitation tank. And then mechanically stirred.
Okay.
This is an involved process that requires multiple tanks. So I named a few tanks. From the models I've seen, they actually go through it's like two sets of, it's in a dissolution tank, it gets pumped to a precipitation tank, it gets mixed, it goes back in. It's a longer process, but it's usually done by machine.
Okay.
So the approved concentration of this mixture is 5% uranium. Well, as I said, it's a longer process.
Mm-hmm.
JCO was like, well, we're going to cut some corners. As one does.
Oh, God.
When you're working with nuclear
Yeah,
power.
it's no biggie to skip some steps.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
So, there is no person who runs the centrifuge. There is just, hey Kim, are you available? Go run the centrifuge.
There's no trained centrifugian person?
No, but I like that word.
I mean...
Centrifugian. No, there is not.
Okay.
Whoever is available.
Seems risky,
Yes.
but alright.
They are mixing this powder by hand. In
What?
a steel bucket. So,
Is there a lid on the bucket?
nah.
What?
There's no lid. It is open.
Just chilling.
Just chilling with...
Could splash around?
Yeah.
Okay.
So remember, they're pouring the powder into, and then they're mixing it up themselves.
Yes. Okay, powder, right. But, okay.
This is illegal to do.
Sounds appropriate.
But it never led to any incidences because the concentration of uranium was kept low.
Okay.
So this company has a history of cutting corners because previously, in 1997, there was an explosion at this plant.
So 2 years before.
Yes.
Great.
They were burning leftover nuclear waste. So like water that had been had like contaminants and stuff inside of the building though. So there was no like letting it out.
Okay.
This led to an explosion.
Yeah.
And several workers and nearby residences had become exposed to radioactive materials.
Okay.
I don't know as far as like litigation or any. I'm not sure about that. Obviously, they were still in operation 2 years later.
Right. Yes.
So now we make it to September 30th, 1999. So the company had been behind 2 days. They were not producing the fuel rods fast enough. So management was like, hey, do whatever you have to do to get these out. So the workers were pouring the mixture directly into the precipitation tank. They weren't using the dissolution tank. Like they were trying to pour it into a shorter, wider tank. So remember I said the cylindrical shape and the basically just being tall is a way to keep things not critical.
Right.
They don't have time for that. So they're pouring it in, they're mixing it by hand, and the workers tasked with this project that day were Hisashi Auchi and Misato Shinohara. What they were doing is, in the room, Misato would be on like a step stool, and he would be pouring the powder into the precipitation tank in a funnel. Hisashi, the man we're going to be talking about, his body was basically pressed up against the tank. Because we only have a step stool here.
Yes.
His hand is over the lip. If you were to think about a big funnel.
Yeah.
If you were holding a big funnel, you'd have one hand over the lip and then the other one would kind of be stabilizing the funnel. Well, their manager, Yutaka Yokokawa, was at a desk, like, in the same room, kind of a little bit of a distance away. Well, the precipitation tank reached 18% of concentrated uranium now.
Instead of 5. Ugh, okay.
There was a loud clap sound.
Okay.
And a glowing blue light inside of the tank. And then the radiation alarm sounded.
Okay.
So the three men ran from the room. Hisashi, the guy we're going to follow, he made it into like a neighboring changing room. Vomited, passed out. Immediately.
Oh my god. Okay.
So much radiation had ripped through his body.
Okay.
And everybody else in the room as well. How you doing so far?
So I watched bits and pieces of Chernobyl, and I'm not looking forward to this at all. Okay, go ahead.
So a sievert is a measurement of radiation. A healthy level of radiation is about 1 to 20 millisieverts per year. So it depends on your job. I think, if you're working, I don't know, probably at like the airport or something, or you're a dentist or whatever, you might be exposed to certain types of radiation. For you and I, who aren't dentists or work at the airport, 1. Maybe you go to the dentist, you get, your x-rays done.
Okay.
A lethal amount is 5,000 millisieverts. Around that. So the manager...
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
when you say, so you said that a healthy amount is 1 to 20
millisieverts
over the course of the year.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like per year.
And so 5,000 now, the lethal, is if you were exposed to it gradually over the course of the year?
I think so.
Okay.
So, because the other thing is they make a point of saying, like, this was all at once. What he got exposed to was all at once.
Yes.
So, yeah, maybe, I mean, even if you think about a lifetime, like, 5,000, I mean, that's a, over the course of your life, that's a lot of,
That's too much. Too much for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so all at once.
That is a
what
lethal.
happened to him.
Well, yes, but that is, in general, the lethal amount is
right.
that. Yutaka, the boss, was exposed to about 3,000 millisieverts, so that's a little bit under the lethal amount.
Okay.
He was sitting at, the desk a little bit, like a few feet away. Misato, the guy pouring the mixture, they estimated that he was exposed to about 8,000 millisieverts.
Mm-hmm.
Hisashi, who was pressed up against the tank and his hand was exposed to the top of it, was exposed to around 20,000 millisieverts.
Okay.
In a matter of like a second.
Why? Firstly, was there like protective clothing?
I don't know. I don't think so. Or at least in my research, no one had said anything about that. But there is a changing room that he ran into, so perhaps they had.
Okay.
But his bare hand was at the lip of
his
the
bare hand. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 20, you said.
20,000.
Okay.
And remember, the normal amount is like 1 to 20. Okay. Like, yeah, depending on where you work.
Okay.
So the nearby residences were evacuated. Because, so before that, in 1997, they had to be evacuated. Remember? Because they were burning the waste. So,
yes.
Like, it would be a real bummer if you were like, we don't have the money to move. Why are we near this nuclear facility, this nuclear materials facility?
Oh, gosh.
So, it took about 20 hours to contain the radiation, which is, it's okay.
Okay.
Well,
sounds reasonable.
if you think about, like, Chernobyl, I mean, that's still going on.
Still not. True.
But I think that was a much bigger
outward.
Yeah, explosion.
Yes.
Hisashi was rushed to the hospital, as you would, and put under the care of Dr. Makawa, who is a leading expert in radiation sickness. And, they were going to assess the damage to Hisashi's body. What do you imagine?
I mean, there's no imagine. I imagine that if the lethal dose is 5,000 and he has experienced 20, that is a situation where 20,000.
Yep.
That you probably hope it just ends immediately.
So, I did neglect to mention they initially thought that Hisashi was maybe exposed to like 8,000 himself. They were not sure of the damage until they assessed it later.
Now, the other thing is, I'm thinking, aren't the people that he's coming into contact with being exposed?
So that came up. I am not sure of the exact science behind it, but it is... He did not touch like a radioactive item.
Okay.
So I guess that's different than being in the air and it is going through his body.
Okay.
I honestly don't know the science behind it, but it was touched upon where they were like initially, okay, aren't the doctor is going to be in danger? What we will find out is that he's more in danger from them than they are for him. So a normal white blood cell count is around 25 to 48% of the they're called lymphocytes.
Mm-hmm.
Hisachi's count was around 1.9%. So he
has no immune system.
Basically has no immune system right now.
Jesus.
When he came in, he looked pretty red. Like he was, he looked like he was sunburned. It didn't really look like anything was particularly wrong other than, geez, you stayed outside too long. And he did have bloodshot eyes, but he was in, like, good spirits. And the nurses were even, because remember, they don't know how much he was actually exposed to. Mm-hmm. The nurses were like, yeah, maybe you can go home later today. That doesn't happen.
How incredibly insidious that is.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, with radiation sickness, the idea is to hopefully get the victim to be seen through to the other side. So your body's going to experience damage, and then hopefully you can, like, basically live through the symptoms, and then your body will start to repair itself. And yeah, you might have a way higher risk of, like, cancer, but your body is working its own magic to rebuild you. It's almost like, if you do get a sunburn, your skin is damaged, and then you would create new cells, eventually not having...
I'm
Jim's
just
face. She's worried.
Because the thought of... Okay. The thought of being like, listen, something... I'm gonna... fucking horrific is gonna happen to you.
Yeah.
And you just are gonna have to... We're gonna mitigate it as much as we can.
Correct.
But there's nothing that can be done.
They're gonna try. So I'm gonna briefly go over the stages of radiation sickness. Okay. So stage 1 is the prodromal syndrome. So when you look up that word, often the migraines come up. That's like the before stage. So typically with radiation, it's like a gut reaction, like vomiting, diarrhea. He vomited and then passed out. Stage 2 is the latent period. So that's when the outside of your body looks fine and the inside is being destroyed on a cellular level.
You are about to mess up my world for the next
Yes.
several days.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing we didn't eat dinner before this. Stage 3 is the manifestation of illness. So that's basically when the immune system shuts down. Mm-hmm. And then stage 4 is either recovery or death. So if you make it through those 3 stages, your immune system hopefully will bounce back. No one has ever been hit and lived with 20,000 millisieverts. I mean, that's...
Right.
That's off the charts. So Hisachi is transferred to Tokyo University Hospital. Okay. And he's given a breathing mask, not a breathing tube, but a mask. And for several days, he appears normal, outwardly. His family's notified, and they come to the hospital, pretty much never leaving at that point. They're living in the waiting room for him. So I think they gave him an age of 35. Mm-hmm. His coworker was around 40. Okay. And then his boss was like in his 50s. So he has a wife, he has kids. He will be there for the next few months.
And they don't leave.
Well, I mean,
Not
it's
really.
basically yeah. This has never happened before. No one, people who are not scientists, you're just hoping for the best. You're hoping,
right?
Yep.
Right.
So in Japanese culture, folding paper cranes is done for good luck or recovery and health. By the end of this, his family will have folded over 1,000 paper cranes. The first sign of trouble is usually a breakdown of mucous membranes and the immune system. So mucous membranes, all of the stuff that holds moisture in your, the inside of your mouth, your intestines, all that.
Your lungs, right?
Your lungs.
Okay, yeah.
The doctors and nurses keep him isolated because, like I had said, or you had asked, isn't he more trouble for them? Mm-hmm. No, he doesn't have an immune system, basically. Doesn't have an immune system. So they need to be as careful with him as possible. He's in a room by himself, and they come to check on him. Pretty much the whole time. So the doctors took a micrograph of bone marrow, which people who are medical people are going to be screaming at their phones and radios. But I didn't know that bone marrow you can look to see the immune system of somebody, or at least the how chromosomes look on like a cellular level. And we will post what normal chromosomes look like versus what Hisachi's look like, which is basically blurry and ripped apart. Like, if you think about, anybody who takes biology, they look like little worm type things, and sometimes they're together and sometimes they're not. His are like all over the place. So the chromosomes in every single body are important because they are the instructions about how to replicate your cells, wherever the cells are. Mm-hmm. If you need more skin cells, it tells it to create these types of cells. They were like, crap, we need to maybe introduce new cells in. So that would be in the form of a stem cell. A stem cell graft was never done at that point in time. So this was, I think, the first instance that they were going to try it and say, I mean, what better time than an irradiated man? They did a micrograph of his bone marrow, found that the chromosomes were basically obliterated, or looking for a stem cell donation, basically. The issue with that is that you need someone to be an exact match. I don't know what that means, but basically it's hard to find an exact match. It's not like blood. Luckily, his sister is a perfect match. So they're going to try this new thing that they've never done before. So we're a week into the hospital, and thirst and dehydration is setting in because of the mucous membranes just being destroyed. And pieces of Hisachi's skin start separating from his body because he's unable to produce new cells. We're always shedding skin.
Okay,
yes. And if you're not able to have that instruction to create new skin, you just don't have skin.
It just leaves.
It started to peel off with the medical tape.
Oh my god.
I'm only laughing because of the reaction I knew I would get with this topic. Because, for those who don't know, Kim hates body horror.
I cannot. I just imagine. Oh, okay. Alright.
So, the staff had to really take precaution when changing out any kind of tube, anything like that. When they were bathing his feet, the skin started to also peel off. He also had to be strapped to the bed, not in a psych ward kind of thing, but in a, it almost looked like a little squishy, like, if you sit in like a massage chair and your legs, they have like that little squishy.
Yeah.
So he was strapped in and moved with the bed so that he wouldn't get bed sores, because he couldn't move. I mean, he would lose skin if he moved.
Yep.
X-rays were done on his lungs, and they saw a dark shadow, and this usually indicates fluid in the lungs. Mm-hmm. The problem with this is, so normally in a patient, they would use a syringe, drain the fluid, and help you avoid bronchitis or pneumonia, anything like that.
Yes.
The problem is that Hisachi's platelet count is very low, so he's unable to stop bleeding if he bleeds. So they're like, crap, we're just gonna up your breathing mask then. Remember, he just has the mask on right now. Mm-hmm. they're pumping so much oxygen in that if he tries to breathe on his own, it's excruciating because you're basically resisting the machine if you're trying to breathe on your own. So, I mean, at one point, I think he rips off the mask and he's like, are you trying... I mean, like, I'm not an experiment here. Which, we will get into that because a lot of people will use this story as a way to go, look at the horrible doctors. You know, they're keeping this man alive through all this stuff. When it was not that. It was, you know, Hisashi wanted to live for his family.
Right.
And they, you know, as a doctor, you can only help keep this person alive.
Right.
I mean, otherwise they're going to go through excruciating pain anyway. You're trying to mitigate it. And, like I said, you're trying to see him through the radiation sickness. So who knows? This has never happened before.
Right.
We don't know what the outcome will be. He also, any pain meds that he has, they're not really circulating that well through his body because his blood is all...
Right. Yeah.
Messed up, basically.
Like...
Yeah.
Just... This guy cannot catch a break.
No. So, eventually, they just decide to put him on a breathing tube. Because the mask is putting a lot of strain on his throat. Mm-hmm. And it's... I mean, if you think about, like... You're probably... dealing with, like, just dry air.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's just like, ugh.
And you're already dehydrated and have no... Yeah.
Mucous membrane. Right. So the stem cell transfusion, luckily, regenerated some of his white blood cells and platelets. And they were hopeful. They were like, okay, he's building a new immune system. We can see him through this. We're going to do it.
Can I have a quick question?
Yes.
Where does one obtain stem cells from?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if it's... I don't know. That's a really good question because...
Because everything's assigned.
Right.
You
I
know?
don't... I'm not...
Okay. All right.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I really wish I would have looked that up for you.
That's okay. We'll look it up later.
So another micrograph was done. And 10% of the donor cells that he got from his sister were now damaged.
Oof. Jeez.
These cells were not in his body at the time of the incident. So the radiation is attacking new cells.
So it's like chilling inside him, basically.
Yeah.
And
like,
just...
It is
wow.
ripping through even new cells.
Wow.
So they wanted to do also an endoscopy to look at his intestines. Now the problem with an endoscopy is that, you know, when you're placing the tube, there might be a little bit of bleeding when you go in. So they had to be extremely careful that even a little bit of a nick would have him bleed out.
Right.
So they're going in, looking at his intestines, and they noticed that his intestines were tense and smooth. So if we've ever seen pictures of intestines,
yes,
they're very like bunched up. They're kind of like what's the folds like in your brain sort of thing. It's a way to, well, I don't know why, but it's a way to basically absorb nutrients. So the mucous membranes, we're only laughing because I'm trying to talk about scientific things and I am not a scientist.
And I'm like, if anybody listens to this, they're screaming.
I know!
Like, you idiots.
We totally acknowledge that we do not know a lot of this.
It's fine. Grooves.
Nutrients. That's a great, yes. And the mucous membranes were still present. So they were like, cool, he can maybe absorb nutrients. We can kind of get him there. So they place him on a feeding tube. And they pass 100 grams of protein into his stomach. And later on, he passes all 100 grams out. So nothing is coming in. They do another endoscopy later. I don't know how much later. Probably, I'm guessing probably a few days. All the mucous membranes are gone at that point. He can't absorb anything.
Oh.
He was excreting, I'm so sorry.
Oh no.
Fluids via diarrhea.
Oh no.
This was actually liquid parts of his intestines.
No. Oh no. Now, okay, so he has a breathing tube. He's out now, right? finally?
I don't. I think he's still awake. He's still awake at this point.
Okay. Okay.
He develops what is called crush syndrome, which I have never heard of before.
No.
And you're going to hate it. Because crush syndrome is if someone, it's usually seen in victims who are crushed. So what happens is, in this case, Hisashi's muscles were the proteins of his muscles were seeping into his bloodstream. And they were filtering out through his kidneys, but it was overwhelming his kidneys so much that he went into kidney failure. So this happens with crush victims where, if a certain part of your body is, I think, destroyed.
Yeah.
That now your body's trying to filter it out. Yeah. And he was losing 3 liters of diarrhea a day.
Liters.
I'm
imagining a liter. Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And not getting any nutrients in.
Right.
So the medical staff was using gauze as a second skin for Hisashi.
Oh, God.
And these needed to be changed daily, taking around 3 hours to change them.
Oh my God, I gasped.
Because you did
made me gasp. Son of a...
So their thing is you're trying not to make him bleed.
Right.
You need to do it in a quick way, but you also need to do it in a careful way. And the reason for this is that skin will regulate your body temperature. Mm. So without the gauze, he would become hypothermic. So they had to up the temperature in the hospital room, working in their, all sweating basically inside whatever suits that they had on, and trying to keep this man alive. He was also losing 1 liter of fluid through bandages a day.
Oh my God.
So I imagine that's like skin, just...
And he has no immune system. So any opening is just...
Yeah.
Any potential infection.
Yep. So the hospital bed, there's plenty of pictures of that where he is...
Oh, no.
No, just the bed.
Okay.
Just like his... Well, there's some pictures of him, but it is like what you would think of like a quarantine. Like they have plastic,
right.
like everywhere, and so it's they're trying. They're really trying to save this man. Hisashi starts bleeding through his eyes.
Okay.
His fingernails and toenails also fall off.
No. Oh no.
It really makes you appreciate your chromosomes.
Well, you're just like, what is left? Like, how is your body living anymore?
I think the other thing is that his family is still hopeful because here's the thing. I think when you're not a medical professional and something like this has never happened before, right. and he's 35, he's a dad, he's a husband. You don't know what to expect. You don't necessarily know scientifically what's happening to them. You're just like, geez, I hope we can make it through to the other side where he starts rebuilding his own self again.
I cannot imagine, though, because my brain's not really allowing me to imagine what this scene looks like.
Yes, probably for the best.
I can't imagine being his family and being like, I feel like I would imagine at some point you'd just be like, how can this man, what else can he possibly go through at this point?
So the other thing is that a lot of times they're looking at him, if they do see him, because, I imagine they're not always they can't be in the room.
No, right, right.
So they're seeing him through gauze. I mean, he's still being wrapped because he doesn't have skin, but they're not seeing the no skin part. They're seeing the gauze part.
Tell how much weight he's probably lost, and...
Yeah.
Oh, good God. Okay.
The doctors now look to the sister who donated the stem cells to maybe donate some skin grafts. Maybe that will help. 70 grafts overall were donated, and none of them adhered to his body. Because I think you have to have something there to begin with. You have to have your cells accept this new graft, I would imagine, and he's being destroyed from the inside out, basically. Around November 18th, they see a GI bleed, and he's losing about 800 milliliters of blood a day inside.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Since around October, so this was, remember at the end, I mean, it was September 30th. So this is about a month later at the end of October. Hisachi's heart was pumping at around 120 beats per minute.
Just all the time.
All the time. So I think the normal is like 70.
You're resting. Yeah, usually is.
All the time, constantly.
Because there's nothing, you're just bleeding out. It's just trying to keep
trying to keep up
basically.
With everything. Okay. So on November 27th, so now all this is happening kind of at the same time. So, they're discovering that they have to give him skin grafts, and they're discovering that they have to, gauze him up and all that. November 27th, his BP tanked, and it was 30/40. So what the normal is like 120 or
over like 70,
80-ish.
Yeah.
The team did CPR because at this time there was no DNR. If you can see Kim's face, she is.
Okay.
Very upset by that.
Listen, it's not my...
So I think also this thing is, there is an alarm that goes off if his heart is in any kind of distress. Something happened with it where someone happened to be walking by and seeing his vitals tank. The alarm didn't go off. So if no one had noticed, he would have just passed, I think.
Okay. But now, CPR is a violent...
Yes.
On a man with no skin.
That has crush syndrome to a degree.
Okay.
So the other thing is they also bring in scientists from other countries who are know about nuclear sickness, or not nuclear sickness, radiation sickness. One guy from Russia's like, can't we just cut off his hand? Because that is what is like poisoning the rest of his body. That was the piece of his body that got exposed.
That's it?
Well, it was, there was no barrier to it. So, like, the rest of his body was at least outside of the tank. Everybody got exposed.
But, like, probably the 12,000 extra that he got came through his bare hand.
But remember, he can't clot his own blood. They can't remove that hand. No. He would die. But it's poisoning his body, basically. His heart stopped multiple times.
Oh.
And it damaged his kidneys and liver, and he was put on dialysis. And however long he was without enough oxygen, he was in a vegetative state at this point. So now he is not awake.
Okay.
So that was November 27th. On December 1st, he developed, this is a big word, hemophagocytosis, which is that macrophages eat red blood cells. So any kind of platelets he had left were being eaten. Resulting in him getting a plasma transfusion that took 3 days. I don't know how they did that, because obviously I think a transfusion would have to be intravenously administered.
Yes. Yeah.
They had to be real careful about, at this point.
You poke him.
Yeah. At this point, though, it's like, we'll try it. I don't know.
But he has no skin.
He still has muscle fibers, though. And I don't know I don't know how much skin he has lost overall. I think it's quite a significant amount.
Okay, so it's not necessarily none.
I don't know that he didn't have any. But whatever he had left was...
It's not enough.
It's not enough.
It's
not enough.
Yep, agreed.
On December 21st, so we've skipped a few weeks.
Yep.
Dr. Mikawa finally convinced the family to sign a DNR. And basically he said, come in, say your goodbyes. They removed the gauze so that they could see him. I don't know that I would necessarily want somebody, but they, his family was, I think, from what people said, mostly stoic and trying to appear like, you're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And, you don't want to scare the person that's in. But at this point, he's not even conscious.
Right.
So
they don't even know. Is there any mention, do they explicitly have any idea what the brain activity is at this point? Or they just don't, they're not sure?
I think they were he wasn't awake.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, they said he was in a vegetative state. I don't know if they told the family that. They must have. I mean, at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And Dr. Mikawa, when the guy came in, after they did the initial assessment, he's like, oh, this isn't good. Like, this is, I don't know what we can do here. But, I mean, as the doctor, you have to do everything you can. If the family wants you to do everything you can. And Hisashi was in good spirits at that point, where he was like, yeah, let's do it. And nobody was able to tell him what exactly he would go through. It had been 83 days since his accident. So they came to say goodbye. They removed the gauze and noticed fungus growing on his body.
No.
Yeah, different types of mold.
Oh my god.
Which I'm sure the nurses saw because they were changing the gauzes every day. But I mean, what do? You don't have a DNR. You gotta keep going. He spent 83 days fighting through radiation sickness and eventually succumbed to organ dysfunction due to radiation exposure. They did an autopsy.
Oh, good boy. Oh, my God.
Okay. His intestines were expanded and swollen. Okay. Whatever he had left. The mucous membranes were gone, but they already knew that. And the muscle fibers in his body were dissolved, leaving only cell membrane. I don't know what that looks like. Yeah. I imagine it's almost skeletal.
True. Right.
There are pictures going around claiming that this is him. There's a terrible one where this person doesn't have any skin. It is not him.
Okay.
That is a burn victim from a medical textbook. But people will share that going around. I don't know that there's a lot of overall pictures of him. There are pictures of his hand. There are pictures of his face. They're not... they basically look like he got sun poisoning. Like,
right.
And then... as it progressed, his hand looks, it's corroded a little bit. But it's not, I don't think it's as bad as you are picturing it.
Yes, okay.
I think whatever probably pictures they have of him, they're like, the public doesn't need to see that.
No. Yeah,
and of course, true. Your family doesn't want people to remember you that way.
No.
His coworker Masato died in the spring due to radiation exposure. His stuff went down typical. It was just longer for him in the process. There is not a lot that I've seen of him because he wasn't the one who got... the focus was on Hisashi. And Yukitawa, the manager, lived. Although I'm sure he's very much, cancer... prone at this point. So JCO, the company, was shut down permanently in 2005, finally. The remnants of the radiation tank are in a radiation history museum in Japan. So I imagine they probably have probably World War II type stuff in there. And when they went to remove it, it still had they had to be careful.
Yeah.
I hope it's behind some sort of
I was gonna say
glass or something.
Oh, I'm good with the radiation museum.
But if you see, it's a tank, and it's basically exploded. You know. And so the paper cranes that his family folded are still left hanging in the hospital today.
Aww.
But that is the history. That is the story of Hisashi Aochi. Wasn't as bad as you thought it would be.
It was just, you know what? it's so much sadder than I thought.
Yeah.
Because
they had a lot of hope, I think. Maybe not the doctor so much because he knew better, but like...
Well, right. And you kind of wonder, not to go into things about ourselves, but as somebody who's been involved in making calls like that before, you have to wonder, right, were the doctors being fully honest? Were they being too gentle with the family?
I also
and not being explicit? Because to think that man's last few months of his life were spent that way.
Pretty much in pain, yeah.
Is so horrific.
It is. And the thing is, I think that also the tough part was he was awake for a lot of it.
So much.
So when his family, especially his kids, would come to see him, you, maybe as a parent, which we will never know, but maybe as a parent, you would be like, okay, I gotta do it. I gotta do it for my kids. Maybe you just have this positive outlook where, I don't know that the doctors would be like, geez, Kim, sorry, it's up for you. Like, they would be like, Kim, keep fighting. So, I think a lot of people blame the family. I don't, we weren't there.
Yes, of course.
We weren't there. This has never happened before. They had alternatives that they thought would work. Maybe in somebody who was less, exposed to less, might have been able to see the other side. And yeah, you might be more cancer prone, but at the same time, you're alive.
Right, you get more time.
Yeah, you get more time. Your immune system's back. You gotta. Yeah.
When did they find out how much he actually got? After, or did they find out
the Millisieverts?
Yeah. When did they finally realize that? I apologize if you said that.
I don't know how they measure that, but it was probably the same day when he came in. I mean, initially, like I said, they were like, probably like 8,000, which is what his coworker had, and still died. Just, it was a longer road for him. Like I said, I don't know what sort of things his coworker went. I imagine it would be the same.
Well, so that was my other question. And maybe that's something I will never look up to find out. But is how terrible that was. Was it because of the level of radiation? Like, on a lower level, a still fatal dose.
Yeah.
Dose feels like a weird word for that. But a lower dose, but still fatal. Would it happen
more slowly?
It would happen the same way, but slower? Or is like this catastrophic stuff? His skin sloughing off.
Yeah.
That's the worst word in the world.
Within like a week, yeah. I don't know. Like I said, most of the research, the things out there on the internet, I'm sure there's a medical journal about it, about his coworker, but I imagine it's what you would think of, okay, so, maybe, probably your immune system gives out, if anything.
Right.
As long as your immune system can be replicated at a certain point, I feel like you're out of the danger zone a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure, but I imagine that's probably what happened to his coworker. He had, I think, a little over like 200 days since the accident of being alive. And yeah, it is sad. It's you don't realize, it's fascinating in a morbid way because you're like, wow, my body really does a lot for me, and I didn't even know.
Trying so hard.
Yes. You're trying real hard out there, so if you're down about yourself, your body has got you, man.
Oh my God, do it a favor. Drink it.
Yeah.
Drink some water.
Drink some water. Go for a walk.
Eat a friggin' apple every now and then.
Be glad when you have, a paper cut that it is in a typical, normal, healthy person. And
she is trying so hard out here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the incredible thing, is what the body can withstand. And certainly, obviously, without medical intervention, he would have died a lot sooner.
Yeah.
But to think, you're like, there's no chromosome.
Right. I mean,
how do you exist
That's
anymore?
the foundation. I mean, right. The blueprints of your body are gone.
Right.
So how is it supposed... It doesn't have instructions. How is it supposed to rebuild anything?
And so, right. So not only are you normally losing skin cells, but everything that the radiation's destroying cannot be replaced.
Nope. And
just
any...
physically cannot happen.
Any new cells are also being destroyed. He didn't even get donor cells that worked. I mean, they worked for like a second.
And 70...
70 skin grafts.
That woman's an angel.
Yes. She's also one of the heroes of the story.
Wow.
I mean, hey, at least the guy had family who really cared about him. They were there the whole time. And imagine, I mean, 83 days, it doesn't seem like that long, but that's a long time to be in this weird limbo where you're like, please, just make it to the next phase.
And I'm horrified that it took 6 more years for that place to be shut down.
Yes. They said by 2005 it was torn down.
Okay.
So I don't know. I
Hopefully
don't know.
OSHA or whatever.
Or whatever the equivalent is in Japan.
Came in and was like, listen.
Yeah.
You get a pause here.
The other thing is they were saying a lot of not power plants. Not a power plant, but it is, a place that they made materials for power plants. That a lot of them were skipping steps too. It was not an uncommon thing at the time to be like, listen, just stir it with your hand and then pour it in. It's like, you really, but at the same time, it's like, you cannot mess around. It's not like you're baking bread.
No.
This is like, there's a reason why we do it the way we do it.
Consequences are a lot more. I just.
And I mean, they were still in business after that first, and I guess we won't burn nuclear waste inside the building anymore. Like, yeah, maybe don't.
Oh, that's not how we're supposed to get rid of it? That's weird. It seemed perfect to me.
How did you fare? Are you okay?
I mean, God.
Yeah, it's sad. It is sad.
It is. I mean, like we said, it's a testament to how resilient the body tries to be.
Yeah. That was the interesting part. Because it's not a story about grossing you out. It's like a story of your body just trying whatever it can. Even with medical intervention, it's really, really trying. And he did it for a second. He started to build back, white blood cells and some of the mucous membranes, but it just, within a matter of days or even hours, he lost too much.
Well, and then it's not even like they could check on something and be like, okay, that's cool. We're fine here.
Right. It was like
changed
trying
on a daily basis.
And like bailing out like a boat, basically.
Right.
Like,
I mean, I can't imagine the mental anguish that must have put on the staff.
Oh, for sure.
To see.
Yes.
And work with somebody for that many days.
I saw a few snippets of interviews with the nurses who had helped. And you could, I mean, they'll never forget him, obviously, but, it's so sad when your medical staff is seeing what they're seeing and the family necessarily isn't.
Right.
You don't want to be like, hey, it's really bad in there. Like, yeah. They tried their damnedest.
And that's why we're not in the medical field either. When you said the medical tape pulled off, I was, I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah. But good for people who are. We need them.
Well, that was educational.
Yes.
I'm going to say that. I'm not going to thank you for it.
You did better than I thought you were going to do. You hung in there.
The other thing is you have to be respectful. You want to be respectful in these situations, and you don't, that's, ugh.
Yes.
The poor guy. For nuclear power.
Mm-hmm. That, nuclear power materials, basically. But yeah.
So then there are other people at the actual power plants who are also at risk.
Yeah, hopefully they don't cut corners.
I mean, you know. Well, Ada's entered the room.
I was gonna say,
she's all set.
Dogus interruptus.
She thinks this is bullshit, and it's over now.
Alright.
Well, thank you. Let's go eat.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relatively weirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.